There is a whole host of historical phenomena directly and indirectly linked to the Siberian cedar. Here is one of them. In 1907, a 50-year-old semi-literate peasant named Gregory Rasputin, who hailed from an isolated Siberian village in an area where the Siberian cedar grows, found himself in St. Petersburg, the capital, and soon became a regular guest of the imperial family. Not only did he amaze them with his predictions, but he possessed incredible sexual stamina. At the time of his assassination, onlookers were struck by the fact that despite his bullet-ridden body, he continued to live. Perhaps he had been raised on cedar nuts in a part of the country where cedars abound. This is how a contemporary journalist described his staying power. At age 50, he could begin an orgy at noon and go on carousing until 4 o'clock in the morning. From his fornication and drunkenness, he would go straight to the church for morning prayers and stand praying until 8 before heading home for a cup of tea. Then, as if nothing had happened, he would carry on receiving visitors until 2 in the afternoon. Next, he would collect a group of ladies and accompany them to the baths. From the baths, he would be off to a restaurant in the country where he would begin repeating the previous night's activities. No normal person could ever keep up a regime like that. The many-time world champion and Olympic champion wrestler Alexander Karelin, who has never been defeated so far, is also a Siberian, also from an area where the Siberian cedar grows. This strong man also eats cedar nuts. A coincidence? I mention only these facts, which can be easily verified in popular science literature or which can be confirmed by witnesses. Lydia Petrovna, who was given the ringing cedar pendant by the Siberian oldster, is now one of those witnesses. She is 36 years old, married with 2 children. Her co-workers have noticed changes in her behavior. She's become kinder, smiles more often. Her husband, whom I happen to know, told me that the family has now been experiencing a greater degree of mutual understanding. He also remarked that his wife has somehow become younger looking and is starting to arouse greater feelings in him, more respect, and quite possibly more love. But all these multitudinous facts and evidences pale in comparison to the main point, which you can look up for yourself, a discovery which has left me with not a trace of doubt, and that is the Bible. In the book of Leviticus, in the Old Testament, God teaches us how to treat people and even decontaminate their houses with the help of cedar. After comparing all the facts and data I had gleaned from various sources, I was confronted by such a remarkable picture that all the wonders of the world faded before it. The great mysteries that have excited people's minds began to pale into insignificance in comparison with the mystery of the ringing cedar. Now I could no longer have any doubts about its existence. They were all dispelled by the popular science literature and the old Vedic scriptures I was reading. Cedars are mentioned 42 times in the Bible, all in the Old Testament. When Moses presented humanity with the 10 Commandments on stone tablets, he probably knew more about them than has been recorded in the Old Testament. We are accustomed to the fact that in nature there are various plants capable of treating human ills. The healing properties of the cedar have been attested in popular science literature and by such serious and authoritative researchers as Academician Pallas. And this is consistent with the Old Testament scriptures. And now, pay careful attention. When the Old Testament talks about the cedar, it is just the cedar alone. Nothing is said about any other trees. Doesn't this suggest the inference that the cedar is the most potent medicine of any existing in nature? What is this anyway? A whole medicine kit? But how is it to be used, and why, out of all the Siberian cedars, did these strange old fellows point to a single ringing cedar? But that's not all. Something immeasurably more mysterious lies behind this story from the Old Testament. King Solomon built a temple out of cedar wood. In return for the cedar from Lebanon, he gave another king, Hiram, 20 cities of his kingdom. Giving away 20 cities just for some kind of building materials? True, he got something else in return. At King Solomon's request, he was given servants that were skilled in felling timber. What kind of people were these? What knowledge did they possess? I have heard that even now, in the far-flung reaches of the taiga, there are old people with an uncanny ability to select the right trees for construction. Back then, over 2,000 years ago, everybody might have known this. Nevertheless, specialists of some sort were required. The temple was built. Services began to be held there, and, quote, the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, unquote. What kind of cloud was that? How far and from where did it enter the temple? What could it have been? Energy? A spirit? What kind of phenomenon and what connection did it have with the cedar? The old fellows talked about the ringing cedar as storing up some kind of energy. Which cedars are stronger, the ones in Lebanon or those in Siberia? Pallas has said that the healing properties of the cedars increased in proportion to their proximity to the forest tundra. In that case, then, the Siberian cedar would be the stronger. It says in the Bible, "By their fruits ye shall know them." In other words, again the Siberian cedar. Could it be that no one has paid any attention to all this? Has no one put two and two together? The Old Testament, the science of the past century, and the current one are all of the same opinion regarding the cedar. And Russian religious thinker Elena Rorich notes in her book Living Ethics, quote, a chalice of cedar resin figured in the rituals of the consecration of the kings of the ancient Khorasan. Druids also called the chalice of cedar resin the chalice of life, and only later, with the loss of the realization of the spirit, was it replaced by blood. The fire of Zoroaster was the result of the burning of the cedar resin in the chalice. So then, how much of our forebears' knowledge of the cedar in its purpose and properties has been passed down to the present day? Is it possible that nothing has been preserved? What do the Siberian oldsters know about it? And all at once, my memory harked back to an experience of many years ago, which gave me goosebumps. I didn't pay any attention to it back then, but now. During the period of perestroika, I was president of the Association of Siberian Entrepreneurs. One day I got a call from the Novosibirsk District Executive Council asking me to come to a meeting with a prominent Western businessman. He had a letter of recommendation from the government of the day. Several entrepreneurs were present, along with workers from the Executive Council Secretariat. The Western businessman was of a rather imposing external appearance, an unusual person with Oriental features. He was wearing a turban, and his fingers were adorned with precious rings. The discussion, as usual, centered around the possibilities for cooperation in various fields. The visitor said, among other things, "We would like to buy cedar nuts from you." As he spoke these words, his face and body tightened, and his sharp eyes moved from side to side, no doubt studying the reaction of the entrepreneurs present. I remember the incident very well, as even then I wondered why his appearance had changed like that. After the official meeting, the Moscow interpreter accompanying him came up to me. She said he would like to speak with me. The businessman made me a confidential proposal. If I could arrange a steady supply of cedar nuts for him, and they had to be fresh, then I would receive a handsome personal percentage over and above the official price. The nuts were to be shipped to Turkey for processing into some kind of oil. I said I would think it over. I decided I would find out for myself what kind of oil he was talking about, and I did. On the London market, which sets the standard for world prices, cedar nut oil fetches anywhere up to $500 per kilo. Their proposed deal would have given us approximately $2 to $3 for 1 kilo of cedar nuts. I rang up an entrepreneur I happened to know in Warsaw and asked him whether it might be possible to market such a product directly to customers and whether we could learn the technology involved in its extraction. A month later, he sent me a reply, quote, "No way. We weren't able to gain access to the technology, and besides, there are certain special interest groups in the West so involved in these issues of yours that it would be better just to forget about it," unquote. After that, I turned to my good friend Konstantin Rakhinoff, a scholar with the Novosibirsk Consumer Cooperative. I bought a shipment of nuts and financed a study, and the laboratories of his institute produced approximately 100 kilograms of cedar nut oil. I also hired researchers who came up with the following information from archives. Before the revolution, and even for some time afterward, there was in Siberia an organization known as the Siberian Cooperator. People from this organization traded in oil, including cedar nut oil. They had rather swanky branch offices in Harbin, China, London, and New York, and rather large Western bank accounts. After the revolution, the organization eventually collapsed, and many of its members went abroad. A member of the Bolshevist government, Leonid Krasnin, met with the head of this organization and asked him to return to Russia. But the head of the Siberian Cooperative replied that he would be of more help to Russia if he remained outside its borders. From archival materials, I further learned that cedar oil had been made using wooden, and only wooden, presses in many villages of the Siberian taiga. The quality of the cedar oil depended on the season in which the nuts were gathered and processed, but I was unable to determine either from the archives or the institute exactly which season was being indicated. The secret had been lost. There are no healing remedies with properties analogous to those of cedar oil, but perhaps the secret of making this oil had been passed along by one of the emigres to someone in the West. How was it possible that cedar nuts, with the most effective healing properties, grow in Siberia, and yet the facility for producing the oil is located in Turkey? After all, Turkey has no cedars like those found in Siberia. And just what Western special interest groups was the Warsaw entrepreneur talking about? Why did he say it would be better to just forget about this issue? Might not these groups be smuggling this product with its extraordinary healing properties out of our Russian Siberian taiga? Why, with such treasure here at home, with such time-tested effective properties, proven over centuries, millennia even, do we spend millions and maybe billions of dollars buying up foreign medicines and swallow them up like half-crazed people? How is it that we keep losing the knowledge known to our forebears, our recent forebears yet, the ones who lived in our century? let alone the Bible's description of that extraordinary happening of over 2,000 years ago. What kind of unknown forces are trying so earnestly to erase our forebears' knowledge from our own memories? Quote, "Oh, you'd better stick to minding your own business," quote, we're told. Yes, they are trying to wipe it out, and indeed they are succeeding. I was seized by a fit of anger. To add insult to injury, I discovered that cedar oil is sold in our pharmacies, but it is sold in foreign packaging. I bought a single 30-gram vial and tried it. The actual oil content, I think, was no more than a couple of drops. The rest was some kind of diluting agent. Compared to what was produced in the Consumer Cooperative Institute, well, there simply was no comparison. And these diluted couple of drops cost 50,000 rubles, which at that time was about $16. So, what if we didn't buy it abroad, but sold it ourselves? Just the sale of this oil would be enough to raise the whole of Siberia above the poverty level. But how did we ever manage to let go of the technology of our forebears? And here we are, sniveling that we live like paupers. Well, okay, I thought, I'd come up with something all the same. I'd produce the oil myself, and my firm would only get wealthier. I decided I would try a second expedition along the river Ob, back up north, using only my headquarters ship, the Patrice Lumumba. I loaded a variety of goods for sale into the hold and turned the film viewing room into a store. I decided to hire a new crew and not invite anyone from my firm. As things stood, my firm's financial situation had worsened while I was distracted with my new interest. Two weeks after leaving Novosibirsk, my security guards reported that they had overheard conversations about the ringing cedar, and in their opinion, the newly hired workers included some pretty strange people, to put it mildly. I began summoning individual crew members to my quarters to talk about the forthcoming trek into the taiga. Some of them even agreed to go on a volunteer basis. Others asked for extra large bonus for this operation, since it was not something they had agreed to when signing up for work. It was one thing to stay in the comfortable conditions aboard ship, quite another to trek 25 kilometers into the taiga and back, carrying loads of wood. My finances at the time were already pretty tight. I was not planning to sell the cedar. After all, the oldsters had said it should be given away. Besides, my main interest was not the cedar tree itself, but the secret of how to extract the oil. And of course, it would be fascinating to find out all the details connected with it. Little by little, with the help of my security guards, I realized that there would be attempts made to spy on my movements, especially during any time I spent ashore. But for what purpose was unclear. And who was behind the would-be spies? I thought and thought about it and decided that to be absolutely certain, I would somehow have to outsmart everyone at once.